Usually a murder trial is, it's an exercise in precision, right? You expect this very clean, straightforward narrative.
Right, exactly. A to B to C.
Yeah, you expect the prosecution to walk into the courtroom, point to a physical object like a smoking gun, a bloody knife, whatever, and say, here is the exact tool of destruction.
The undeniable proof.
Right. It's supposed to be undeniable.
Yeah.
But today is Monday, March 16, 2026, and a jury in Park City, Utah, just proved that you really do not need a smoking gun to send someone to prison for the rest of their life.
You really don't.
No. I mean, in fact, you don't need a weapon at all as long as you have, the microscopic digital grains of sand that a suspect leaves behind.
That is exactly right. We're looking at a verdict that, it fundamentally redefines how we understand proof in a courtroom today.
Yeah.
Because when you step into the world of complex domestic poisoning, of synthetic opioids and digital footprints, the traditional expectations of a murder trial are just completely shattered.
Oh, totally.
You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky, built on, thousands of tiny, seemingly disconnected data points.
And today, we are diving into that exact landscape. Welcome to the deep dive. I'm going to ground you in this specific moment because after 3 weeks of intense, grueling, just emotionally exhausting testimony in a Summit County courtroom, the verdict is officially in.
It is.
Let's put it right out there at the very top so you, the listener, know exactly where this story ends before we figure out the incredibly twisted path of how it started.
Yeah, let's just say it.
Kouri Richins, the Utah mother who notoriously wrote, published, and went on television to promote a children's book about coping with grief, literally exactly 1 year after her husband Eric's death. She's just been found guilty.
It is a staggering moment. The jury handed down a unanimous guilty verdict on all 5 counts.
All 5?
Yeah, that's aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, 2 counts of insurance fraud, and forgery.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for you today is to walk through exactly how a jury arrived at that unanimous decision in less than 3 hours of deliberation.
Which is incredibly fast.
3 hours after 3-week trial. We're going to examine the absolute mountain of evidence the state brought forward. And when I say mountain, I'm talking about 11 terabytes of data.
Right, and just to give you a sense of scale, 11 terabytes of text and image data is roughly equivalent to millions upon millions of pages of documents.
Oh.
It's an ocean. Server logs, cell tower pings, bank statements, text messages, all of it.
Right. It's not a single smoking gun. It's a mosaic made of 1 billion microscopic tiles. So we're going to break down exactly how the prosecution built this narrative piece by piece and, how the defense attempted to dismantle it.
Mainly by leaning heavily on the fact that there is no physical murder weapon recovered from the scene.
Exactly. And to do this properly, we've pulled together a massive stack of primary sources for you.
Oh, a huge stack.
We're looking directly at the daily trial transcripts. We're analyzing the comprehensive forensic and toxicological reports from the medical examiner.
Which are wild to read, by the way.
Completely. We've gone through the extensive local and national news coverage, ranging from KSL in Utah all the way to the gavel-to-gavel coverage on Court TV. And most importantly, we are looking at the specific, highly detailed evidentiary exhibits that were shown directly to the jury.
We have the receipts.
We have the data.
We do. And what's fascinating here is that this trial serves as an absolute masterclass in modern circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
There was no direct eyewitness to the actual poisoning. Nobody saw Kouri Richins put a pill into a drink.
Right.
The entire guilty verdict was constructed through this intricate, interlocking web of financial documents, digital footprints, and some, highly controversial witness testimony.
It really forces us to ask a very modern question, right? In the digital age, does the concept of a perfect crime even exist anymore when your smartphone is essentially acting as a star witness against you?
I don't think it does. I really don't.
That is the defining question of this entire case. Because to truly understand this crime, we can't just look at the night of the murder. We have to look at the socioeconomic reality of the victim, Eric Richins, and the accused, Kouri.
The financial context is everything.
Right. We have to look at the absolute financial pressure cooker they were living inside. So let's start with Eric. Who was he before he became the victim in this national true crime sensation?
So the sources paint a very vivid, consistent picture of Eric Richins. He was 39 years old when he died. He was the highly successful co-owner of a masonry business called C&E Stone Masonry, based right there in the Park City area.
And if you know anything about real estate and construction in Park City, Utah, You know it is a booming high-end market.
Oh, absolutely. Custom homes, luxury ski lodges. Eric's business was thriving. And he was known throughout his community as this devoted family man who, by all accounts, just completely idolized his three young sons.
Yeah, the trial really highlighted that.
He wanted a very specific kind of life for them. A stable, outdoorsy, traditional life. Hunting, sports, family dinners. And through years of grueling physical labor and, smart business management, he had built an estate worth roughly $4 million.
So Eric is the anchor. He's solvent, he's building generational wealth, and his focus is entirely on his children's future.
Exactly.
But then we look at Kouri. She is operating a business called Kouri Richins Realty. She's a real estate agent and, crucially, a house flipper.
Right.
The prosecution repeatedly described her during the trial as intensely ambitious. But ambition without capital, especially in the high-stakes world of real estate flipping, is an incredibly dangerous thing.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Because despite projecting this outward flawless image of extreme wealth, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, the perfect suburban lifestyle, the financial reality underneath was terrifying.
Yeah, she was in what prosecutors accurately described as a downward financial death spiral.
Death spiral is a strong term, but the forensic accounting backs it up completely, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The county actually brought in a specialized forensic accountant just to trace every single dollar.
Which is not cheap.
No. This analysis alone cost the county $200,000 to produce, which tells you how complex her financial shell game really was. And the accountant testified that Kouri was carrying between $4.5 million and $8 million in debt.
I want you, the listener, to just let that number sit in your mind for a second. Up to $8 million in debt.
It's staggering.
Like, how does a local real estate agent even accumulate that kind of liability without her husband knowing?
Well, it happens through the specific mechanics of house flipping and hard money loans.
Okay, break that down.
So when you flip a house, you aren't usually getting a traditional 30-year fixed-rate mortgage from a standard bank. You're often going to private lenders for hard money.
Which means high interest, right?
Astronomically high interest rates, sometimes 12 to 15% or more. The idea is that you buy the house, renovate it quickly, sell it, and pay off the loan before the interest crushes you.
But if the market shifts,
or if renovations take too long, or if you simply buy a property that you can't sell, those interest payments compound rapidly. You have carrying costs, property taxes, contractor fees.
so you're just bleeding money.
Exactly. Kouri was taking out new high-interest loans just to pay the interest on the old loans. It was a classic Ponzi-style debt structure, and it was collapsing. She had negative bank balances across multiple accounts. Creditor lawsuits were pending.
And the prosecution presented hard evidence showing this wasn't just a sudden run of bad luck in the market.
No, not
It was a multi-year history of active financial deception aimed directly at her husband. As early as 2016, she began secretly misappropriating his funds.
Yeah.
We're talking about withdrawing $200,000 in cash from Eric's accounts without his knowledge. She was charging $30,000 to his personal credit cards.
And, it escalates from simple theft to outright felony fraud. She didn't just borrow a little cash. She actually forged Eric's signature on a power of attorney document to procure a $250,000 loan.
Wait, let's break that down for the listener. Because forging a power of attorney for $250,000 isn't just like scribbling a name on a check.
Oh, no.
You have to bypass bank security, you usually need a notary. How does she pull that off?
It requires an immense amount of audacity. You have to present legally binding documents to a financial institution, fully misrepresenting your legal authority over your spouse's assets.
That is wild.
The prosecution showed this to establish a pattern. Kouri was not afraid of complex, document-based deception. But the real breaking point, the absolute epicenter of the tension in their marriage, was a specific property referred to in court as the Midway Mansion.
Yes, the grand home. This was a massive, unfinished $2 million property in Midway, Utah.
And Eric explicitly did not want to buy it.
Right. The sources show he thought it was way too expensive, way too risky, and just a terrible investment. But Kouri went behind his back and closed on the property anyway, using funds he had not authorized.
And when Eric discovered this, along with the other missing money around 2020, the confrontation was severe.
I can only imagine.
He didn't just yell at her. He took legal action to protect his boys. He met with an estate planner. He sought to remove Kouri from his will and his trust, and he specifically named his sister as the executor of his estate.
So he's essentially building a legal wall around his $4 million business and his assets so that Kouri couldn't touch them if something happened to him.
Exactly. He was trying to protect his children.
But Kouri was making her own moves in the shadows.
Yeah.
The jury saw a paper trail proving that she secretly took out multiple life insurance policies on Eric, totaling nearly $2 million in death benefits.
Which is a huge red flag.
So she is drowning in $8 million of debt. She's buying $2 million mansions she can't afford, and she's taking out secret life insurance on a husband who has just cut her out of his will.
It's a powder keg.
And on top of all this money, there was another layer to the motive. The paramour.
Yes. The jury was shown a series of text messages between Kouri and a man named Robert Josh Grossman.
And who is he?
Grossman was a handyman who was actually living in one of her rental properties. And the digital forensics team recovered texts where Kouri is openly fantasizing about a completely new life.
Oh, wow.
She's texting Grossman about leaving Eric, gaining millions of dollars, and eventually marrying Grossman.
Okay, here's where I want to push back a little, or at least try to untangle the logic here.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to put myself in her shoes, looking at this from a purely cold, calculated perspective. She's on a sinking ship. The water is up to her neck with this $8 million debt. And instead of buying lifeboats, she, as the captain, is secretly buying lead weights.
That's a good way to put it.
She's taking out more loans, buying more property. So what does this all mean? If she wants out of the marriage and she wants to be with a handyman, why not just file for divorce?
Right.
Did she fundamentally misunderstand her own prenuptial agreement? Did she actually believe that Eric dying was the only financially viable way out?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of forensic psychology and financial crimes, that is exactly the psychological trap she was in.
Okay.
The prosecution laid this out brilliantly as the core motive. They argued that Kouri fully understood the prenuptial agreement. She knew that if she filed for a divorce, she would walk away with virtually nothing.
Because of the prenup.
Exactly. She certainly wouldn't get the millions she needed to pay off the hard money lenders. However, she made a massive, fatal legal assumption.
Which was?
She wrongly believed that if Eric died, the prenuptial agreement would simply vanish, and she, as the surviving spouse, would automatically inherit his multi-million-dollar share of the masonry business, plus the $2 million in secret life insurance payouts.
Wow. So in her mind, the math is incredibly dark, but incredibly simple. Divorce equals bankruptcy, public humiliation, and exposure of her massive fraud.
Right.
But death equals a clean slate, millions of dollars in the bank, and a new life with Grossman.
Precisely. As the state argued in their closing, she desperately wanted to leave Eric, but she absolutely did not want to leave Eric's money.
Which brings us to the night of March 4, 2022. Having established the why, this crushing, suffocating financial rate, and the perceived multi-million-dollar parachute, we have to transition to the how. We have to look at the physical mechanism of the murder.
Yeah, let's look at the timeline of that night. It was a Friday night.
Okay.
Kouri's initial statement to investigators paints a picture of domestic tranquility. She tells police that she and Eric were celebrating in their bedroom because she had just closed a major real estate deal.
So they're celebrating.
Right. She makes him a drink, a Moscow Mule, and brings it to him in bed. She claims that shortly after, one of their sons woke up having a nightmare. So she leaves Eric in the primary bedroom and goes to sleep in the child's room to comfort him.
Okay, that sounds plausible enough.
Hours later, roughly around 3 a.m., she says she came back to the primary bedroom and found Eric cold to the touch at the foot of the bed. She calls 911.
And what happens when the paramedics arrive?
Well, when first responders arrive, they immediately note something strange. She is not performing CPR or any life-saving measures.
Oh.
Eric is pronounced dead at the scene.
And initially, because there is no blood, no weapon, no obvious sign of trauma, the cause of death wasn't immediately obvious to the paramedics.
No, it looked like maybe a sudden cardiac event.
But then the body goes to the morgue, the autopsy is performed, and the toxicology reports come back. And when the medical examiner, Dr. Pamela Sue Ulmer, takes the stand during the trial, what she reveals to the jury is absolutely chilling.
Dr. Ulmer presented undeniable medical evidence. The toxicology reports showed that Eric's blood contained approximately 5 times the lethal dose of illicit fentanyl.
5 times?
Yes. Now, to understand the gravity of that, we have to explain what fentanyl actually is and how it works in the body.
Right.
Fentanyl is a highly potent synthetic opioid. For a non-tolerant individual like Eric, a man who had zero history of illicit drug abuse, the lethal dose is incredibly small. We're talking about roughly 2 milligrams.
That's like what, a few grains of salt?
Exactly. It's microscopic. He had 5 times that amount coursing through his bloodstream.
But wait, fentanyl is everywhere in the news right now. People accidentally overdose on it all the time because it's pressed into fake prescription pills.
True.
So the defense naturally tried to argue early on, well, couldn't he have just taken a bad pill for a backache? Couldn't this just be a tragic accident of a man secretly using recreational drugs?
They absolutely tried to float that theory, but the medical examiner completely destroyed that narrative through one very specific, irrefutable biological detail.
And what was that?
Dr. Ulmer testified that they found a boatload of fentanyl still sitting, undigested, inside Eric's gastric system, his stomach.
Wait, if it's in his stomach, that completely changes the timeline, right?
It changes everything.
Because if someone is recreationally abusing fentanyl, they usually smoke it, snort it, or inject it so it hits the bloodstream instantly. But digestion takes a long time.
Right.
So finding it in the gastric system means he had to physically swallow a massive amount of it.
Exactly, you hit the nail on the head. The location of the drug proves the route of administration. Recreational drug users do not generally swallow fentanyl pills because the stomach acids and the liver process it too slowly. You don't get the instant high. Finding a massive, concentrated amount of fentanyl in the stomach proves it was ingested orally. It was swallowed. And because fentanyl is notoriously bitter, it had to be disguised in something strong.
Like, for instance, a strong-tasting cocktail,
Like a Moscow Mule.
which is made with sharp ginger beer and heavy lime juice. It is the perfect acidic, heavily flavored liquid to mask the chemical bitterness of a crushed synthetic opioid.
Precisely. And the toxicology report revealed a second drug in his system as well, quizipine.
What is quizipine and why does it matter here?
Quizipine is an atypical antipsychotic medication, often used to treat bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. But one of its primary off-label side effects is heavy, profound sedation. It knocks you out.
Okay.
And crucially, it was a drug that Kouri Richins herself had an active prescription for. Yes. The prosecution's theory, based on the pharmacology, is that she drugged his Moscow Mule with the ketamine first. She needed to ensure he was heavily sedated and unconscious.
Why?
Because a fentanyl overdose is not necessarily a peaceful fading away. Opioids bind to the mu-opioid receptors in the brainstem, which control the autonomous drive to breathe. They essentially tell your lungs to stop working.
That's terrifying.
This causes respiratory depression. If a healthy 39-year-old man feels his breathing stopping, he might panic, he might fight, he might thrash around or try to call for help.
Right, he would struggle.
The ketamine ensured he was too heavily sedated to fight the dying process. Furthermore, the autopsy confirmed Eric had no underlying heart disease, no stroke, no natural causes. He was a healthy man who was acutely and deliberately poisoned.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the jury didn't just find her guilty of the murder on March 4th.
No, they didn't.
They found her guilty of attempted aggravated murder as well. Because the Moscow Mule was not the first time she tried to kill him.
It was not. The prosecution proved that exactly 1 month prior, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2022, there was a preliminary run, a rehearsal for the murder.
The Valentine's Day sandwich.
According to the timeline presented in court, Kouri purchased a favorite sandwich of Eric's from a local diner in the town of Kummas.
Okay.
She left it on the seat of his truck with a romantic Valentine's Day note. Eric finds it, eats the sandwich, and almost immediately experiences a massive, violent physical reaction.
Oh my God.
He breaks out in severe hives all over his body. He begins losing consciousness, and he only survives because he manages to frantically inject himself with his son's EpiPen and swallow a massive dose of Benadryl.
Which is terrifying.
Mhm.
But if we look at the pharmacology again, hives and anaphylaxis are allergic reactions, right?
Yeah.
They aren't typical overdose symptoms for opioids.
They aren't.
So she likely used a different substance for the dry run, something that triggered a massive allergic response. But what is truly crucial here is what Eric did after he recovered from that sandwich. He didn't just brush it off as bad mayonnaise or food poisoning.
No, he didn't. He confided in a very close friend. He explicitly told this friend that he believed his wife had just tried to poison him.
Wow.
This piece of testimony was absolutely vital for the prosecution because it established a clear pattern of behavior. It completely debunked the defense's later theory that the March overdose was just some tragic, sudden accident.
Because Eric himself, from beyond the grave, was telling the jury She's trying to kill me.
Exactly. Plus, the state introduced cell phone location data from that Valentine's Day. It showed that immediately after dropping off the sandwich, Kouri drove to an unknown location and began texting her paramour, Grossman.
I have to push back here, or at least ask you to analyze the psychology of this, because it seems completely irrational.
How so?
Well, if you attempt a murder with a sandwich on Valentine's Day, and it fails spectacularly, I mean, not only does he survive, but he actively suspects you tried to kill him and he's telling his friends about it. How on earth does the perpetrator justify trying again just 3 weeks later with a Moscow Mule? Doesn't self-preservation kick in? Does the financial desperation just completely override basic human caution?
This raises an important question about the mindset of a killer who feels the walls closing in. You have to remember the exact timeline of her financial collapse.
Yes, pivot.
In February and March of 2022, the creditors were not just calling, they were circling. Lawsuits were pending. The $8 million debt was suffocating her.
So she's out of time.
In forensic psychology, we often see that extreme desperation creates a profound tunnel vision. The need for the solution, in this case, Eric's death, and the perceived millions in inheritance, becomes so overwhelming that it blinds the perpetrator to the risk of getting caught.
So she just couldn't stop.
She didn't have time to wait 6 months for a better opportunity. The financial dam was about to break right then. She had to act, regardless of the suspicion she had already raised.
So she doubles down. But this brings up a massive logistical problem. If a suburban real estate agent, a mother of 3 living in a wealthy enclave like Park City, decides she needs a lethal dose of synthetic fentanyl to pull off a murder, she cannot exactly walk into a local pharmacy and ask for it.
No, she cannot.
The jury needed to know the supply chain. How did the poison actually get into the Midway rental property?
And that brings us to the prosecution's star witness, a woman named Carmen Lauber.
Enter Carmen Lauber. She was employed as a housekeeper for the Richins family, and she came to the witness stand carrying quite a bit of heavy baggage.
She did. Lauber had a heavily documented history of drug convictions, including possession and distribution of controlled substances.
Okay.
In fact, she was actively in a state drug court program when she was first approached by homicide investigators, and her testimony on the stand was absolutely explosive.
What does she say?
She claimed under oath that she acted as a middleman, actively sourcing illicit drugs for Kouri Richins on 4 separate occasions between late 2021 and early 2022.
And the timeline she laid out for the jury tracks perfectly with the poisoning attempt. That's right.
It tracks exactly. Lauber testified that Kouri initially approached her asking for standard prescription painkillers, specifically hydrocodone. Kouri claimed Eric's back was hurting.
Which sounds somewhat normal.
But then the request escalated significantly. Lauber testified that Kouri specifically asked her to procure some of the Michael Jackson stuff.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase, the Michael Jackson stuff. She was referring to propofol, right? The incredibly powerful hospital-grade anesthetic that caused the pop star's death.
Exactly. Propofol is not a recreational drug. It doesn't get you high. It puts you into a deep surgical coma.
Right.
The prosecution pointed out that if a layperson is asking a street dealer for propofol, they are not looking for a weekend high. They are looking for something definitively surgically lethal.
Wow.
Lauber testified that she couldn't get propofol, so instead she contacted an associate of hers in the drug trade, a woman named Susan Kohler, and purchased counterfeit pills pressed with fentanyl. And the method used to hand over these drugs was highly clandestine.
It wasn't just handing a baggie over in the kitchen while dusting the counters.
No. Lauber testified that she left the pills inside a fire pit at one of Kouri's rental properties in Midway.
A literal dead drop, like something out of an espionage novel.
A dead drop. Lauber detailed a specific drug buy on February 11th, which yielded 15 to 30 fentanyl pills. That is just 3 days before the Valentine's Day sandwich attempt.
Wow.
And then she detailed another purchase on February 26th, just days before the fatal Moscow Mule incident on March 4th.
Now, if I'm the defense team attorneys Wendy Lewis and Kathy Nestor, my entire strategy revolves around utterly destroying Carmen Lauber's credibility.
Without a doubt.
I am painting her as a career criminal, an addict, and a liar who is fabricating this entire story to save her own skin.
And they did exactly that. The cross-examination of Carmen Lauber was brutal. They hammered her on her long history of drug abuse, they questioned her memory gaps, and most importantly, they exposed her motives for testifying. The jury was made fully aware that Lauber was testifying under a grant of both federal and state immunity. She was essentially handed a get-out-of-jail-free card in exchange for taking the stand and implicating Kouri.
But the defense didn't just rely on the immunity deal to cast doubt. They actually showed the jury a video of Lauber's police interrogation. And I want to talk about this because this video sounds incredibly intense and, frankly, highly problematic.
It was one of the most pivotal moments in the entire trial. The defense played a video for the jury where law enforcement investigators have Lauber in an interrogation room, and they are openly aggressively threatening her.
Oh, wow.
They tell her she is in violation of her drug court conditions. They tell her she is facing up to 7 years in state prison. And then an investigator explicitly tells her, and I'm quoting the transcript here, "Give us the details that will ensure Kouri gets convicted of murder."
Okay, wait. I genuinely have to debate this with you. But if I am sitting on that jury and I watch a cop look at a drug addict and say, give us the exact details we need to convict this specific woman of murder, or you are going to a cage for 7 years, I am throwing that testimony in the trash.
I mean, that's exactly what the defense hoped.
How is that not textbook coercion? In any other circumstance, wouldn't a judge look at that and say the police just handed the witness a script?
You are identifying the exact argument the defense made, and it is a very strong one. The defense argued this was blatant, undeniable coercion.
Right.
They pointed out that in Lauber's very early interviews with police, she completely denied dealing fentanyl to Kouri. She only changed her story and only admitted to sourcing the fentanyl after the police informed her that Eric had died specifically of a fentanyl overdose.
And after they dangled that 7-year prison sentence over her head?
Exactly. The defense's narrative was clear. The police told Lauber how Eric died, told her what to say, and threatened her until she said it.
So, put yourself in the jury box. You have an admitted drug dealer who changes her story. She is explicitly threatened with prison time by police who tell her exactly what details they need. On its face, it looks like a profoundly compromised witness.
It really does.
If the state stops there, the defense wins. But the prosecution didn't just leave Lauber on an island, did they? They had something to back her up.
And that is the crux of modern prosecution. You rarely have a perfect, saintly witness when you are dealing with a drug-related murder. You are forced to rely on the criminal underworld.
Right.
But the state corroborated Lauber's heavily flawed human testimony with cold, hard, unbiased digital data.
The cell phones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They brought in digital forensics experts who analyzed cell phone location data. Using cell tower trilateration, they matched Lauber's physical movements perfectly to the dates and locations of the Midway fire pit drop-offs she described.
Wow.
The server logs don't lie, and they can't be coerced by police.
The server logs are the one witness that never forgets a detail and never cracks under cross-examination.
Exactly. But even more damning than the location data, the prosecution introduced actual text messages between Kouri and Lauber.
What did they say?
In one specific exchange, right around the time of the murder, Kouri texts her housekeeper asking if she still has, quote, the hookup.
Okay, that is incredibly hard to explain away. Why is a wealthy suburban real estate agent asking her housekeeper for the hookup just days before her husband drops dead of a massive opioid overdose?
The defense tried to argue that Kouri was simply asking for painkillers because Eric had a bad back.
Yeah, but
the prosecution countered that argument easily. If you are just buying some Vicodin for a legitimate backache, you don't use espionage tactics. The intense secrecy arranging to leave pills hidden inside a fire pit in the dead of winter instead of just handing them over in the kitchen spoke volumes to the jury about the illicit and lethal nature of those pills.
It is the digital footprint that always trips them up. People think they're being clever, but they don't realize their phone is recording every single keystroke.
Every single one.
And honestly, the digital footprint in this case goes so far beyond a few text messages to a housekeeper. It brings us to the evidence that showed intense, undeniable premeditation and an unbelievable consciousness of guilt. Let's talk about the Google searches.
Oh, the search history. When law enforcement seized Kouri's devices, forensic experts used specialized software-likely tools like Celebrate to extract her entire internet search history.
And what did they find?
What they found reads quite literally like a how-to manual for committing murder and trying to get away with it.
It is wild. Let me read some of these to you. In the days surrounding the murder, she is searching for women Utah prison. She's Googling, can cops force you to do a lie detector test?
It's so incriminating.
Yeah, wait, she searches verbatim. If someone is poisoned, she actually spelled it wrong, P-O-I-S-N-E.
Oh.
What does go down on the death certificate as? She's actively searching for information about how life insurance payouts work after a death.
This is where we see the incredibly stark intersection of intention and panic. Before the murder, she is searching for the mechanics of the crime death certificates, poison.
Right.
After the murder, she's researching the consequences, lie detectors, prison conditions. It completely systematically erodes the defense's narrative that she was an innocent, grieving widow who was shocked by her husband's sudden passing. You don't Google Utah women's prisons if your husband just tragically died of a sudden heart issue.
And speaking of grieving, there is a detail presented to the jury that I find so deeply disturbing it almost feels like bad fiction. The morning after memes.
Yes. This is perhaps one of the most visceral pieces of digital evidence in the trial. At 8:29 a.m. on March 4th.
The morning he died.
This is the very morning Eric was found dead. Just hours after the paramedics have packed up and left, while her husband's body is likely still being processed on a cold metal table at the county morgue, someone using Kouri's password-protected phone is scrolling through internet memes.
Unbelievable.
And they aren't just any memes.
Right. The digital forensics team pulled these up. The jury learns that she viewed a photo of Donald Trump with a large caption saying, "I'm really rich." She views an image that says, "Idiots. Idiots everywhere."
It gets worse.
And perhaps worst of all, she views a meme of a woman using money to wipe her crying eyes. Now, I know how smartphones work. Even if you try to delete this stuff, the phone's NAND flash memory retains that data in an allocated space until it is physically overwritten by new data. The police found it all.
And the prosecution used this specific moment to hammer home the financial motive and her absolute lack of empathy. They argued to the jury, this is not the behavior of a woman whose entire world has just been shattered by the loss of the father of her children.
No, not at all.
This is the behavior of someone who is celebrating a multi-million-dollar payday.
It is like leaving a breadcrumb trail, but the breadcrumbs are glowing neon signs pointing right at you. But if the memes in the Google searches were a neon sign, what happened a year later in September 2023 was a 50-foot billboard.
Oh, the letter.
Let's talk about the walk the dog letter.
While Kouri was being held in the Summit County Jail awaiting trial, sheriff's deputies conducted a routine sweep of her cell. Hidden inside a book, they found a 6-page, handwritten letter. The letter was titled, with 2 exclamation points, "Walk the dog."
And it was not about canine exercise.
Far from it. It was a masterclass in attempted witness tampering. The letter was explicitly addressed to her mother, Lisa Darden, and it contained detailed, step-by-step instructions for what Kouri's brother, Ronnie, needed to do to help sabotage the prosecution's case.
What did she want him to do?
She literally instructed her mother to tell her brother to falsely testify to her own defense attorneys. She wanted Ronnie to say that Eric Richins had a secret drug habit, that he bought his own fentanyl from Mexico, and that he, quote, just gets high every night.
So she is sitting in a jail cell trying to write the script for her own defense.
Essentially, yes.
She is trying to use her brother as a puppet to plant a false narrative that Eric killed himself by accident.
She literally commanded it. The letter didn't just suggest the idea, it gave direct orders. She wrote, "Tell him I need him to do this. Bring me home."
Bring me home. Wow.
The prosecution presented this as textbook witness tampering. It showed a desperate, calculated attempt to fabricate an alternative theory of the crime from behind bars.
Okay, so the state finds a 6-page handwritten letter where the defendant is explicitly telling her family to lie under oath to frame the dead victim as a drug addict. If you were the defense attorney, how do you even attempt to explain that away to a jury?
It was a highly novel excuse.
I bet.
The defense team, relying on recorded jailhouse phone calls Kouri made, claimed that the letter was not actually a set of instructions for her family at all. They claimed it was a creative writing exercise.
Wait, what?
They argued it was an excerpt from a 65-page fictional mystery novel she was writing in jail.
A novel? You're telling me she claimed this was fiction?
Yes, she said it was a book called To Hell and Back, and that the Walk the Dog letter was simply a scene she was drafting, featuring her father investigating a fictional drug ring in Mexico.
Oh my goodness.
It was essentially an argument that the letter was a piece of steganography, a hidden message disguised as art.
I am just marveling at the sheer volume of self-incrimination here. It's like a digital Trojan horse she built against herself. But this brings up a fascinating point about modern trials.
Yeah.
How do juries typically digest this kind of digital and documentary evidence versus the old school physical evidence? Is a Google search for how to poison someone or a weird handwritten letter really as damning in a courtroom as finding a vial of poison sitting in their nightstand?
It is a phenomenal question, and it really strikes at the heart of modern jurisprudence. Historically, juries always wanted the smoking gun. They wanted the bloody knife in an evidence bag.
Right, the physical proof.
But today, prosecutors argue, and juries increasingly agree, that a digital footprint is actually more reliable than physical evidence.
Really? How so?
Think about it. A vial of poison can be planted by an enemy. Physical evidence can be manipulated. But a consistent multi-month pattern of Google searches, corroborated by text messages to a drug dealer, cell tower pings, and a 6-page handwritten letter outlining a cover-up.
It's hard to fake all of that.
Exactly. That shows the internal workings of the defendant's mind over time. It shows complex premeditation. It is incredibly difficult for a defense attorney to explain away a typo-ridden Google search about death certificates made from a password-protected phone at 2 a.m.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For this jury, the digital footprint was the smoking gun.
Which perfectly sets up the final phase of this tragedy and the absolute irony that made this case international news in the first place. Because while Kouri's smartphone was silently writing a terrifying narrative of guilt, she was actively trying to publish a completely different narrative to the public. Let's examine the grief author persona.
This is where it gets really surreal. Approximately 1 year after Eric's death, while the police investigation was quietly stalling and waiting on complex toxicology reports to be finalized, Kouri made a move that shocked everyone.
Yeah.
She self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me? It was ostensibly written to help her 3 young sons cope with the horrific grief of losing their father.
And she doesn't just publish it quietly. She goes on a media tour. She goes on local television on a show called Good Things Utah, promoting this book.
I remember seeing those clips.
She sits there on the couch, looking directly into the camera, playing the role of the devoted, tragic widow, trying to turn her pain into purpose. But the trial exposed the reality behind this book, and it was unbelievably cold.
It was a complete facade. Detective Jeff O'Driscoll testified that a forensic analysis of her phone and financial records revealed she didn't even write the book herself.
What? Wait, seriously?
Seriously, she paid a commercial ghostwriting company $10,000 to produce it. Now, in the ghostwriting industry, if you pay 10 grand for a children's book, you are getting a turnkey product.
So they do everything.
You give them a vague concept, and they write the text, hire the illustrator, format the pages, and hand you a finished file ready for Amazon. Furthermore, the jury saw text messages between Kouri and her brother, where she is coldly calculating the profit margins of the book.
Oh, wow.
She figured out she would make exactly $5.35 per copy sold. The prosecution argued this was not an act of maternal love or a therapeutic exercise for her children. It was a calculated business venture to make money, and more importantly, it was a massive PR shield.
It is the ultimate performance of innocence. The psychological dissonance is staggering. She is essentially calculating that if she writes a book to help her kids grieve, society won't possibly believe she is the monster who killed their dad.
It's camouflage.
It really is. And her family pushed this narrative hard to protect her. During the police investigation, an anonymous package was sent to the sheriff's office.
Oh, right, the package.
It contained a copy of the children's book and an anonymous note defending Kouri, saying, "This is a true Kouri, a devoted wife and adoring mother. Stop investigating her."
And, of course, because of the digital footprint, investigators simply subpoenaed Amazon's shipping records and quickly proved that the anonymous package was purchased and sent by Kouri's own mother.
It is just staggering how every attempt to hide only illuminated their guilt further. So the state rests its case after painting this incredibly detailed picture of a fraudster, a poisoner, and a manipulator.
They laid it all out.
They have the financial records, the cell data, the search history, the housekeeper. How does defense attorney Wendy Lewis even begin to fight back in her closing arguments?
Lewis leaned incredibly hard into the one glaring weakness of the state's case: the absolute lack of physical evidence linking Kouri directly to the act of poisoning.
Okay.
Her core theme to the jury was that the state looked at a grieving woman and saw a witch. But if you look at the actual physical facts, you see a widow. She argued the state's entire narrative was paper-thin, built entirely on asking the jury to make speculative leaps and assumptions.
And the defense had one major, undeniable physical discrepancy to point to, right? A massive mistake by law enforcement. The lost evidence.
Yes. This brings up the legal doctrine of spoliation of evidence. When first responders arrived at the house on the night Eric died, they took crime scene photos.
Right.
One of those photos clearly showed an empty hydrocodone pill bottle sitting right on Eric's nightstand. It had some kind of dust or white residue inside it. The police log indicated that the bottle was placed in the body bag and sent to the medical examiner along with Eric's body.
So they collected it.
But by the time the defense team asked to examine and forensically test that specific bottle months later, law enforcement had lost it.
Wait, it just vanished into the ether.
It completely vanished. Now, in law, to prove spoliation, which allows a judge to tell a jury that missing evidence would have favored the defense, you generally have to prove that the state destroyed it on purpose or acted in bad faith.
Does the defense prove that?
They hammered this point relentlessly. They argued that this missing physical evidence robbed them of the crucial opportunity to prove that Eric was consuming illicit drugs voluntarily that night. They asked the jury, how can you convict a woman of murder beyond a reasonable doubt when the police literally lost the most likely source of the victim's overdose?
That is a massive fumble by the investigation, and it is exactly the kind of reasonable doubt a defense attorney dreams of. And it leads to one of the most shocking, dramatic moments of the entire trial.
It really does.
March 12, 2026. The state rests its case after calling 42 witnesses over nearly 3 weeks. The defense team asked the judge for a brief recess to confer. They come back into the courtroom, the gallery is silent, and they abruptly announce they are resting their case without calling a single witness.
Nothing.
Kouri completely waives her right to testify. They put on zero defense.
The presiding judge, Richard Morosic, literally called this high-stakes poker on the record.
Okay, I have to know why. Is resting without calling a single witness an act of supreme confidence? Is it the defense saying, the state's case is so incredibly weak, so circumstantial that we don't even need to dignify it with a response?
Well,
Or is it a sign of sheer panic, knowing that putting Kouri or her family members on the stand would have been an absolute bloodbath under cross-examination by the prosecution?
it is almost always the latter, and in this specific case, thanks to the legal filings, we actually know exactly why they did it.
Why?
It was a strategic, highly defensive retreat designed to keep even worse evidence out of the jury's hands.
Explain that. What were they hiding?
The defense desperately wanted to call a witness named David Norris. Norris supposedly was going to testify that Eric Richins had asked him to procure fentanyl back in 2019, years before Kouri ever allegedly bought any from the housekeeper.
Which would support their theory that Eric was an addict.
Exactly. It would have perfectly supported their theory. However, the prosecution fiercely objected. Judge Mrazek ruled that if the defense opened that door by calling Norris to talk about Eric's drug history, it would give the prosecution the legal right to introduce previously barred rebuttal evidence.
Well, the barred evidence. What was so bad they folded their entire case?
The state was holding highly incriminating recorded jailhouse phone calls between Kouri and her family. Specifically, a call involving Carmen Lauber's boyfriend talking about her making money selling fentanyl.
Oh, wow.
The judge basically told the defense, if you want to pull on this thread and talk about Eric's drug history, the state gets to pull on theirs and play these phone calls to the jury. The defense attorneys realized that the damage from those jailhouse calls would be instantly fatal to their case.
So they had to stay quiet.
To keep those calls out of the jury's ears, they had to remain completely silent. They folded their hand.
Wow. High-stakes poker indeed. And unfortunately for them, they lost the hand. Which brings us back to the present moment, the Park City courtroom. After 3 weeks of grueling testimony, 42 witnesses, and 11 terabytes of digital evidence, the jury went back into the deliberation room.
And as we mentioned at the top, they were back in less than 3 hours, unanimous, guilty on all 5 counts.
The sources describe the scene in the courtroom vividly. As the judge read the verdict, Kouri simply stared at the floor, breathing heavily, showing almost no emotion. On the other side of the aisle, Eric's family, who had been sitting in that gallery day after day, week after week, finally broke down, hugging and crying.
It's an emotional end to a long saga.
It really is. Kouri is now facing 25 years to life in prison, and the sentencing date is set by the judge for May 13th.
Which is an incredibly heavy date. May 13th would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all the way back, what is the grand synthesis of this trial?
The defense bet absolutely everything on the old school rules of murder trials. If you don't have a murder weapon, you cannot get a conviction. They argued Eric was worth more to Kouri alive than dead.
Right.
But the jury fundamentally rejected that 20th century logic. They believed the digital footprint. They believed the crushing reality of an $8 million debt.
Yeah.
They looked at the imperfect, incentivized housekeeper and decided she was telling the truth over the polished, PR-crafted facade of the grieving author. The jury decided that you don't need to see the physical poison in a glass if you can read the digital poison in the internet search history.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on as we wrap up. We just walked through an incredible case where the killer tried to literally write her own narrative of innocence and bind it into a children's book. She tried to craft a perfect, bulletproof alibi out of public sympathy and television appearances. But in today's world, your phone is writing your autobiography in real time, whether you want it to or not. Every midnight search, every deleted text to a handyman, every meme viewed at 8:29 in the morning while a body lies in the next room.
It's all recorded.
It is all there, permanently etched in silicon. It is the shattered X-ray pieced back together with data. It makes you wonder, in an era where our digital shadows never die, is the concept of a perfect crime completely extinct? And how much of our cultural obsession with true crime is actually fueling perpetrators to try and outsmart the very system they are studying, only to leave a trail of digital breadcrumbs right to their own jail cell?
A chilling question, and a reality we all live in today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, check your digital footprint, and keep questioning the narratives around you.